So good afternoon. It's 3:30 on Wednesday, April 29th. And my name is Phil Conrad, and I'm here to introduce Jared Fitton, who's a second year CCS computing student for his mid-residency review. Let's welcome Jared Fitton.
Hi, everybody. Like Phil just said, my name is Jared Fitton, and I'm a second year computing student here at the CCS. So let's just kind of jump right into what we will be discussing. So first of all, there's the before, kind of how did I get to UCSB and what brought me here in the first place. I'll go into my goals, what I wanted to accomplish while I was here, some industry experience, projects I've worked on, takeaways, life lessons I've learned throughout my 2 years, and then what I'm looking to do in the after this presentation. So short term versus long term. So let's jump into the before. So before I got here to UCSB, I was a member of my high school's computer science academy. So growing up, I loved making videos with my friends. Now, when I say videos, I mean super cheesy special effects videos using After Effects that I have buried on YouTube, and they are private and they should never surface again. But this is relevant because that's kind of what got me into computer science in the first place. Well, initially I wasn't involved in the technical aspects. I just loved computers and seeing what they could do. So joining the Computer Science Academy gave me a kind of glimpse into what goes on under the hood there. And through the Computer Science Academy, I was also able to be involved in several apps, which I have a screenshot of, a couple screenshots of. So it just led to lots of great opportunities and experiences. Speaking of experiences, I was able to run a computer science camp with Diva Mirza, who's a computer science faculty here at UCSB. And on top of that, I also took a Python for the web course that Phil helped write. So before I even came to UCSB, I've had my roots here. I just didn't really know this is where I was going to end up. And perhaps the greatest achievement, or most notable experience before coming to UCSB was this kid named Akshay messaged me on Facebook before fall 2018, and we geeked out about the huge, fantastic experience we were going to have. And I think if you asked him, he would agree that we've had some good times so far and more to come. So now kind of moving into the goals. So at a high level, I had three primary goals. I wanted to seek opportunity and prepare for the future, whether that be research or industry experience. I wasn't really sure. But also it was important to enjoy the journey. If you don't enjoy the journey, then what's the point? Like, you have to enjoy the process of getting there because you're never really going to get there. Life is one continuous stream. So that was very important to me. And third of all, it was to kind of determine, like, is grad school something that I want to do, or is industry going to be the direction that I want to go? So currently I'm leaning a little bit more towards industry, but I'll talk a little bit about that more later on. So speaking of industry, let's kind of just dive into what I've been working on. So the first company I want to talk about is NovaCoast. So after my junior year of high school, I was hired as a software development intern. Before being hired, my primary experience was in iOS development for some personal projects and some hackathons that I'd worked on, but I didn't really have an in-depth knowledge of web frameworks or really just how to be on a team and work on code that other people's touching. So this Ruby on Rails application was kind of the first kind of experience I had in that. And it was actually a really cool project. I got to work on this web application for a telephone manufacturer production line that was going to be implemented in some factories. I can't talk about specifically what it does or who it was for, but you've definitely heard of them. It was a really great experience, especially for someone who was new into kind of that tech industry. So it kind of showed me the potential of what I could be working on. I also discovered that HTML and CSS are really not my cup of tea. It's fine, and I have so much respect for the people that do it, that they love it, and I will let them have the work that I would be doing otherwise. So I really kind of figured out that, like, Ruby backend work, databases was a lot more interesting to me, kind of less user facing and more kind of like dealing with the logic. So moving on to my second year at NovaCoast, And I think it's important to note that I worked, since being hired at Novacoast, I don't just do summer internships, I work year round. So this is just kind of like the highlights of the projects that I've seen. So for year two, I took a iOS and Golang app that several interns had created the previous year. And what they told me was essentially take this and run with it. So figure out what features that add, what would be cool, how can we better optimize performance. And through that, so to kind of target the feature collection point, I collaborated with human resources and event coordinators for Novacoast to determine what they wanted. And then from there, we figured out how to prioritize everything, given, feature X will take this amount of time, but is it as important as feature Y? So it was a really interesting process, kind of first learning how to, prioritize different tasks. And also, this was my first experience running my own project. So it was another learning opportunity for me, learning how to manage only myself and the tasks that I had to do in time. The VP of development kind of helped me oversee it a little bit, but at the end of the day, it was me running this. So it was a really great learning opportunity. And moving into my third year at Novaco, so that brings us up to our present point. I was promoted to a junior software developer, which was great because it gave me a ton of increased responsibility, and it allowed me to help mentor the other interns that were coming in. When I first started at Novacoast, it was honestly really challenging, and I didn't have I didn't have that technical expertise, and it's something that I've grown and developed over time. So it means a lot, and it's really important to me to help other interns and just students in general kind of help bridge knowledge gaps that they aren't aware of. But in addition to kind of helping the other interns, it being a junior software developer also allowed me to work with an array of different industries. So being a junior software developer at Novacoast means I'm a contractor. So that allows me to be contracted out to different companies. I can't speak specifically to what companies because I'm under NDA for that, but healthcare, government, defense contracting, those sort of spheres is what I've worked in. But a project I can talk about is this previous summer, I led a 4-person team to create an automated front desk assistant, which was a cool experience. You can see the tech stack there. But I think one of the really cool parts was that this was my first time leading a bigger team in a professional setting. On top of that, one of the interns was based out of Manchester, England. So it's very interesting managing the time difference because it was like he was a totally different day. So it was a very great experience. But I'm currently still working with Novacoast, and yeah. So let's move on to Hello World. So Hello World is a startup that I helped found this last year. So the middle of my freshman year, I reached out to the Computer Science Academy director, basically just saying, how can I help the current students and how can I give back? I felt like coming to UCSB, there was definitely some areas that could have been helped bridge or that could be worked on to make the transition to college a little bit easier. So that's what I reached out, and through over time, working with the Computer Science Academy board, we eventually created this program called Hello World. And the idea is to help connect high school students who are eager and passionate about computer science to the tech industry and nonprofits. So the high school students are the programmers. The tech industry essentially sponsors the program. So they help pay for server costs and the costs of some of the faculty, and the nonprofits are the clients. So they have the need for the software and the students help create that. And so through this, it was a really great opportunity to help for me to teach the students some of the knowledge that I'd learned. And the role that I took was the project manager. So we had weekly sprints where we met at the Sandbox, which is a work sharing space downtown Santa Barbara. I'd help delegate the tasks to students and teach them coding topics that they maybe didn't have the most in-depth knowledge about. And then from there, we had weekly breakouts over Zoom. So Hello World has only worked with one organization. It's only about a year old at this point. And we actually worked with Coast SB and the UCSB Marine Science Institute. Coast SB, what they do is they collect data, or they collect beach topography measurements throughout the beaches in Santa Barbara. So essentially the elevation changes. And what this is used for is the US Geological Service twice a year goes through all the beaches in California and they take those same measurements. They're much more in depth, but 2 times a year doesn't really give you the full picture. So the idea is to help supplement that data. And I'll kind of get into that at the end of this. I'll talk about what that's actually used. We've done 2 phases for Hello World at this point. Phase 1 was February 2019 to July 2019. We developed an app that the volunteers for Coast SB would use to enter in the data that they collected. And so the app itself doesn't do the collection of the data. If you look at the picture in the upper hand left corner, you can see people holding up sticks with a rope. It's a little archaic, but it works perfect. That's used to measure the change in elevation over time. You line the stick up with the horizon. It's pretty cool, but essentially what they would do is they would write all that down on paper. So we created an iOS app that they would do that for them, that would help do that for them. Like I said, we had weekly sprints. Moving on to phase 2, we created a corresponding web portal to retrieve that data. The iOS app initially would send an email directly to our contact at Coast SB. And the purpose of this was we wanted to break up the project into segments. Having a whole backend is required maintenance and development time. So we initially had the email being sent. And then for phase 2, while we did do updates to the iOS app, we wanted to have a central hub where all the data could be accessed or downloaded and viewed. For example, you can see you can analyze data trends over time and view more specific information about the survey. So Hello World and why it matters. I think like the most important, like the first thing you should look at in this is look at Anacapa Beach on the right. From 1975 to 2016, over 40 years, that is an insane difference. And a lot of this it's not primarily only due to climate change, but climate change is happening now. And that's part of the reason why this data is so important. We want to help spread awareness as much as we can. And Hello World and anybody really creating tools to help facilitate people that are trying to make the world a better place is an extremely important thing, in my opinion. And all the while, high school students get to help learn and develop their skills. So it really is a win-win process for everybody involved. Moving on to Pool Up. So Pool Up is another startup that I've been working on. Oh, and I should with Hello World, I'm no longer a project manager. I'm currently a program advisor, just giving advice on the kind of direction of the program as time goes on. I've stepped away and had found a replacement for the project manager position. I just don't have the capacity for it at the moment. Part of which is because of Pool Up. So Pool Up is a long distance rideshare platform for college students. I'm sure lots of you are aware of the current Facebook rideshare group. So this is very similar to that. So initially, when we founded this, it was initially called Journey, and I started it with 3 other interns that worked with me at Nova Coast last summer. And part of the process of us working on marketing, determining if there's actually a need for this, how we would make people aware. One of the things I did was I reached out to one of the admin of the UCSB Facebook group, and it turns out they were also working on something very similar. So one thing led to another, and we ended up merging our 2 startups and created Pool Up. And that team is now spread across UCLA, UCSB, UC Berkeley, and Stanford. So it's been a really great opportunity getting to work with such a high caliber team and with so many different talented people. And I think one of the things that's important to mention is why are we creating this platform if there already is something out there like that? And the thing is, there is nothing quite like it, but the UCSB Facebook group, rideshare group, lots of colleges have groups like this, but the problem that comes up with them is they're disorganized and there's really no accountability for drivers or passengers to actually show up. from lots of the research we've seen, that was a very large problem. So essentially what we aim to bring is structure to that, to make it more easy to find rides and join rides. It beats having to mass comment on dozens of posts for the hopes of maybe potentially getting a spot, assuming it hasn't already been filled up yet. So that's essentially the problem we're trying to solve. We want to make it easier for students to get around California, because it's, most students don't have cars. So just kind of makes that process easier. In terms of the tech stack, I've primarily been a backend developer, working a lot on the business operations side too. It's actually my first experience using Node.js. It's been very enjoyable, I will say. It took a little bit to learn it, but I've really enjoyed the experience so far. And like I said earlier, front-end HTML, CSS is, but I did dabble a little bit with React on the front end, and I wouldn't acknowledge saying this, but it almost made the experience slightly enjoyable. So it's definitely something, if I had to work on the front end, I would deal with again in the future. And here's just a couple screenshots that kind of give you an idea of the feel of the platform. There's much more to it than this, but you can see the basic layout of picking a ride and confirming and viewing the current rides you have upcoming. You can message your driver, cancel rides, etc. If you have more questions, you can ask me about it later, and I'd be happy to share more. But yeah, so Pool Up moving forward. We just launched our alpha version, and beta will be coming at the beginning of summer. We were planning on launching beta right before spring break, but because of the COVID situation, we pushed back. So we are going to be focusing on adding more features and smoothing out kinks between whenever now and people can, hang out again. So we want to launch officially at UCSB in the fall or whenever school begins after COVID-19. All right, finally, my last industry experience is Blink. So Blink is an iPhone app that helps players find, organize, and play games at local venues: sports, board games, video games, tag, cards, and more. Essentially any game you can think of playing. And so the idea behind the app is you can essentially host a basketball game, for example, at a local basketball court, and you can have players buy in to join. So you could have a $5 fee to join, and then the winner takes a portion of that. You could have it be free. The idea is to generate community. But the CEO of this app reached out to me several weeks ago looking to hire developers and kind of get their current iOS app to where it needs to be. Obviously, in the current COVID situation, this isn't, at least the physical form, isn't an app people can use because people need to maintain social distancing. But one of the things we want to do is we want to add esports components, make it so it's a little bit more usable, but also just really lock it down. So once things lighten up, people will be able to go out and enjoy and use this. So I will be a freelance software engineer for them starting in May or June. And then eventually we'll develop a Flutter app, so that way we can have one code base for cross-platform iOS and Android applications. All right, so let's kind of talk about some of the projects I worked on. So the D3C protocol. So the D3C protocol stands for the Decentralized Device-to-Device Chaining Protocol. I partnered with the one and only Garrett Lee on this. And Safe was involved at one point until he dropped the class. No shade, but it's fine. So this is for our CS 176B class. And the reason I bring this up is because it was an original idea, maybe not the first person to think of this, but for the project, it was essentially make something. And this is what we made. And I think it's pretty an interesting idea. So I want to talk about it. Essentially, with the amount of smart devices out in the world, smart printers, smart TVs, smartphones, we wanted to play with the idea of using their personal access networks to create mesh networks where each device would essentially act as a router, client, and host. And it wouldn't rely on existing internet infrastructure. So essentially, you could send a message like across New York City, for example, without ever using the internet infrastructure. It would simply bounce through all the different people's devices. And this isn't practical in every application because, if you're in a rural city, you're not going to have you're not going to have like the level of condensed devices that you need. But there are specific use cases where it could be helpful, especially in emergency situations, where if you have down infrastructure, this could be a potential revenue for emergency services to have communication. So there's a lot you could do with this in terms of the ways that you could implement it. If you kind of look at this first image, you see this interconnected mesh of nodes. And while that is the ideal use case, what we did was we created a linear implementation of this. And when I say linear, you can essentially think of it as like a linked list. So you have on a horizontal axis, you have a series of devices where devices can join at the front or the end and join in the middle. And so when a message is sent, it's propagated through the chain, and it doesn't go to every single device. That would defeat the purpose of the protocol. But that's a very simple implementation of it. And if the mesh network splits, like if a device in the middle, you can actually look at the picture I have on the screen where you have those 3 iPhones. If the one in the middle were to disconnect, then the 2 on either side would be able to join together. So the network will always do its best to try to create as big of a group as possible. And if we were to keep developing this, the idea would be you'd have all the devices interconnected, so that way they can communicate with each other as fast as possible. But we didn't do that because doing it linearly reduced a lot of the complexity, and we didn't have to worry about all the routing that would be very difficult for an 8-week project. Another project that I just started is a smart lock. So there are tons of smart locks out on the market right now, August-wise, but I am personally a fan of building tools myself, kind of what I talked about earlier about how like After Effects was very interesting to me, but it was even more interesting learning how it worked and to get to kind of apply and build some of those tools for myself. So that's essentially what I'm doing here. I want to see how can it be done better, because I've used them and I have things that I don't like about each of them. So I want to see if I can create a version that fits my lifestyle a little bit better. And the primary reason I'm doing this is I think it's going to be a really good learning experience into a ton of different areas. For example, 3D modeling. I stole my brother's 3D printer. I asked, but I have it now. And I've been doing some 3D modeling, learning how that works. And the 3D modeling portion comes in to build casings for whatever it is I end up building. I have experience with Java, but I haven't really gotten to do any Java backend development. So that's kind of going to be some areas that I get to implement that on some hardware along with using motors. My MVP for this will be a simple smart lock that connects to Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. I haven't decided yet, but yeah, so you connect to it and unlock the door. And then eventually I will add facial recognition, where once the camera detects the user's face, it will send them a 2-factor authentication message for security purpose, because since I'm not having any depth scanning, facial recognition can be fooled like a piece of paper. So it's just to kind of help circumvent security breaches and people trying to be malicious. So I want to talk about some of the takeaways that I've had here at UCSB. I've only been here for 2 years, but I've learned a lot, and I feel like I've grown a lot more than it feels like for 2 years. So hard work in the classroom requires fun in the real world. I think that the school life work balance is so incredibly important that you can work, like, at least for me personally, like I can work all day and be extremely successful in the classroom, but if I don't have that relief and that de-stress outside, then I don't feel like I'm being successful. So what I've done to balance school is I've also done things like scuba diving. I got certified at the UCSB Recreation Center, hiking, kickboxing, basically whatever I can do to get out and be active. Another important thing I've learned is it is okay to not know what is coming next. Life is long and you don't always know what you're going to be doing next. This has been a stressful thing for me in terms of what I want to do with my career. I know I like software development and engineering, but I don't know specifically what it is that I want to do with that. And that feels overwhelming sometimes. But what I've learned is you just have to take it one step at a time, and that you look at your current opportunities, you look at what you're doing now, and that will all build to your future success later on. And that you simply can't know. But that's part of the fun of life, is not knowing exactly what's coming next. And also, I think something that's not talked about enough is imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is real, but that is okay. When I came to USSB, I felt a little out of my league when it came to the people that I was surrounded with. And part of that is being, part of the CCS, where I'm surrounded by incredibly high caliber and talented people. And while I'm also a part of this, it's easier to look out than to look in. And tons of people feel like this. And that's okay. That over time, you just have to learn how to put yourself out there, which is what I've done, and learn that you're just as capable as everybody else. It just takes time, and for you to realize that someone else's strengths might not be your strengths. Someone else might be better, but that doesn't mean you're bad. It just means different areas that you can have better expertise in. So let's talk about the after. So after this presentation, the short term, I want to continue to seek very cool opportunities for real world applications of computer science. If you haven't gotten from my presentation, I am very much into real world. Not that research is not real world, and I do not mean to diss, but kind of industry is what has been very exciting for me. And paid with that industry, I've been taking some technology management program classes. I've taken the business fundamentals and the management of technological organizations classes, which have been super interesting. I'm debating if I'm going to get the certificate. I haven't decided if it's worth the time investment yet, but it's been a good opportunity so far. And I would also like to join SB Hacks. Akshay and everybody really tried to get me to join this year, but I just, because of work and projects and prior commitments, I did not have the time needed for it. And in addition to next year, I will hopefully be taking the 291A Scalable Web Systems class with Bryce Bowe next winter. I've actually worked with Bryce Bowe a very little bit about. He gave me some mentoring a while back, so it'd be very cool to have some instruction actually by him. And then kind of wrapping up the short term, I'd like to graduate 1 to 2 quarters early. It just kind of depends on how the next 2 years go, or the next year or two goes. For the long term, I want to most likely go directly into industry and focus on consumer and enterprise software. Graduate school is something that I'm open to, potentially for computer science, but if I were to go to graduate school, I would more likely go back for an MBA, because I think where I really specialize is bridging the gap between developers and clients, that I have the technical understanding and expertise, but I also have these social capabilities to explain everything going on and just kind of bring people together. That kind of leads into me being very interested in project management and creating businesses. As much as I love being a software developer, I think that there is more that I want to do beyond that. And in terms of where that is, I've lived in Santa Barbara all my life, so I'd love to get out and see the Bay or Seattle, London, go abroad. I really don't know. I'm just going to kind of see where life takes me, just in it for the ride. So that concludes my presentation. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to let me know.
All right. Well, this is the point at which we would offer applause. It's hard to do that over Zoom, but I will applaud on behalf of everyone. Thank you for an excellent presentation, Jared. I'm going to start off the questioning this time. I want to go back to the app at Nova Coast that you were able to talk about, and I believe it was like a front desk assistant. That's my question. Yeah, automated front desk assistant. Is that one, is the reason you were able to talk about this because this is for use at Nova Coast itself? Is this for Nova Coast's front desk, or?
Yeah, this is more of an internal application.
Gotcha. And is it, has it reached production yet, or is it still in development, or?
Yeah, it's reached production. We deployed it in Manchester and Santa Barbara.
Nice, nice, excellent. The other question I had was about your the mesh network project. And you mentioned that for the mesh network, you were using a linear topology. Is this a project that's still ongoing, or is this one that you kind of did for one of your networking classes and you've set it aside, or what's the status of this one?
Yeah, so we kind of put it on hold for now. I think it's an interesting topic that is potentially something I'd like to further research in the future, but I just personally don't have the time to allot resources to it right now.
Gotcha. If you do pick this up again, one of the things you might want to look at, are you familiar with the distributed spanning tree protocol?
Slightly.
Yeah, so the idea is that rather than a linear mesh, you just come up with a spanning tree, a graph that has no loops in it that reaches every node. And there's Radia Perlman is credited with developing the distributed algorithm for spanning tree to develop a spanning tree. It was used on Ethernet bridges way back in the day, but it's still applicable. I mean, I think it would be applicable to something like this. So something to look
Because
at.
yeah, one of the things that we have like a hard time dealing with is because not everybody is going to be in reach of everybody. Because the idea is like me being where I am right now in IV, I could reach somebody all the way at UCSB. And
Right.
so, and also another factor is people are going to be constantly joining and leaving the network as they come out
Yes.
of range. So it's constant reconfiguration. But I think that that's definitely something that could be helpful if I were to pursue it in the future.
The other thing to point out is I don't know if you've taken any courses from Elizabeth Belding, but mobile ad hoc networking, like one of the basic protocols for that is like one of her major career contributions. She actually won the Test of Time Award for a paper in this area that was like super influential. So she'd be somebody to talk to about ideas if you ever pick this up again.
Yeah, definitely. I actually took my CS 176A, which is the first computer networking class. I took that with her. So she was a very great teacher, and I heard about that protocol or the paper she wrote.
Gotcha. Let's go to Richard. Richard, what questions do you have for Jared?
Oh yeah, sure. So I'm not muted. Okay, I'm not muted. First off, great job. I think that your activities and your interests, you've been doing a lot, and it's really impressive. Going back to the Hello World startup, that was something that I thought was a really cool idea. Really good at giving back to the community, measuring stuff that's really important. I don't know if you mentioned this or not, but how many people are actually in the startup?
Oh, I think the first round we had around 8 students, and similar for the second phase. The second phase was a combination of some from the first, but yeah, 8 was kind of the ideal size. Much more, and it got a little bit too difficult to like for one specific project.
Got it. Okay. And the Hello World name I thought was really creative. And then in the back of my mind, I thought, I wonder if many other companies try to do Hello World. Was it like, did you find a lot of other companies with the same name?
There was a couple other, but I think this was the most appropriate application of it.
Yeah, I thought it was creative. So that's cool. And I guess my next question, going back to your mesh network, the D3C. So it sounds like you're trying to build like what, is an overlay network. But one thing that I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around is, are you using the cellular provider's infrastructure to communicate, or is it literally just like a direct connection from the mobile devices
It's
to relay points?
so this was literally the devices were communicating via Bluetooth. So the
Okay.
whole idea is it's completely external of existing infrastructure.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, because there's a lot of work on overlay routing. A lot of them use like the internet infrastructure, TCP/IP sockets. It's more scalable in terms of you can reach larger distances. It avoids like bottleneck congestions in larger protocols like BGP. But one of the things was, how do you make it decentralized? How do you make it scalable versus having like, what is the best bandwidth route basically, and trying to like route around traffic. So that kind of reminded me of work in that area. And I thought it was really cool. And to put this together in an 8-week project is pretty impressive. So that's something that I thought was really cool. Um, Other than that, I don't have any more questions. I just think that, a lot of the projects and ideas and startups you're working on are really cool. And I wish it the best.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I want to echo that this is a really, for 2 years, this is a really impressive collection of a lot of really significant work. So I think it's really shows it's the kind of thing that we are looking for from our CCS students, is to have to do well in their courses, but to really have a rich variety of experience outside of the coursework. and you've done that. So congratulations. Let's see if there are any questions or comments from the students here. If you would like to ask a question, okay, you can raise your hand. I see Daniel is indicating applause. I don't know if that's just applause or if you would like to share something. Daniel, do you want to unmute yourself, or are
Oh
you
yeah, not the best timing. I was just applauding.
Got it. Good. So in the participants window, there's a place where you can click raise hand if you want to raise your hand to ask a question. I'll unmute you and call on you. Okay, it looks like everyone is a little shy today, but that is fine. Let's once again thank Jared Fitton for a great MRR presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here.